So, this afternoon we are going to continue with our journey up Mount Everest. I am the Sherpa, remember? You can put all of your luggage on top of me. I can carry it all the way to the top of the Mount Everest. The sommelier, sadly there wasn't any wine at lunch, but I have a sneaking suspicion there may be some later on. And yes, hopefully you're in your double loop learning mode again. It is a mindset, you have to remember. As Ted Lasso, which is another one of my favorite programs, says, be curious, not judgmental. So be curious, always be curious. So, welcome back to this afternoon. We've got a few talks this afternoon, then we're going to move into our round tables, then we're going to get everyone back for a little bit of polling and then more Mentimeter technology. So, the biggest question everybody is asking, I'm sure, about Freddie is, what's his favorite film? So, he did give me two, so I don't know the one that you can tell everyone about, but when you're talking you can. His second favorite is Star Wars. Of course, it has to be Star Wars. So again, we are kindred spirits, and hand over to Freddie. Thank you very much.
Yeah, perfect. The first one I mentioned, and that's maybe something just for the German speakers, was Stromberg. I learned a lot about offices in Stromberg, and actually some things still apply. So hi everyone. I want to talk a bit about agents and how we can use agents in labs. Who of you is fed up with her or his LinkedIn feed and people talking about agents? Okay, awesome. Me too. So what I really want to do is first kind of frame what's the agentic world, what are agents, what are the limits of agents right now, and let's not talk about marketing, but what can we deploy right now today. Secondly, what's the fit for labs? Where do we actually see use cases in wet and dry labs, and where are we actually deploying them, and I will tell you a bit more about the use cases. And third, how are pathways to use cases? So I agree with everything we heard. Change management is so essential. It's about kind of the journey, it's the marathon. And at the end, I will also show you a bit more about our platform, Microsoft Discovery, and how it can enable research. So first thing is, people are now only talking about agents, but I just want to make the differentiation. There is assistance. We just heard people bring your own tool, right? That happens. We usually conduct the Work Trend Index. The Work Trend Index 2024 found out that around 80% of the people actually bring ChatGPT to work. And it's not the one that you want. It's not governed. It's just, it's just the application. If it's ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever, Perplexity, 80% of your colleagues, at least according to our research, and we asked 30,000 people across the world, are using it, right? So we need to find agents that are compliant and that are built into your platform. Then there is, assistants. Then there are the agents. Agents are focused on business processes. And when I talk about where we are right now and our vision, we are currently usually in phase 1. There's a human with an assistant. I don't see that much of agents running around. I see a lot of products called agents, but what we usually use is an assistant. Every employee has an assistant, uses that. Second phase, human-led agents. So we have some digital colleagues that could, for example, input data into an ELN system, into a LIMS system that are capable of multimodality. So I can do a photo of something, of a scale, of something I've written down, and I can input it directly into a system of source. And phase 3, and I will be super honest with you, is not there yet. That will be autonomous agents. Humans set the directions. A lot of agents are running around, and magically the process is automated, right? That's a vision, and that's where we want to head to, but there are a lot of prerequisites we actually need to come to phase 3. So what I really see is we are in between phase 1 and phase 2. And before I will start with the use cases and the lab experience, I really want to talk about what an agent is, because I think sometimes we are lacking that experience. We are talking about agents and LLMs doing tasks. We're trying to trigger them. And for example, ask a LLM how many R's are there in strawberry. Usually it's wrong. right? Cannot count 3 Rs somehow, because it's not meant to do that. But if we're an agent can actually invoke tools. And a tool does not have to be an LLM. A tool can be an LLM writing Python code, and the Python code gets executed in a stateless environment, and that gives back something. A tool can be an API triggered to an ELN system, to a LIMS system, to SAP, and can retrieve that information. And again, there, tools are also traceable. So I have references. I can look into that, I have a link, and I can click on it, and I can jump into that system. Agents also have knowledge. So I don't want to ask an agent over and over again. There should be short-term and long-term knowledge about me as a user, about my user behavior, maybe also about my team. Also, that has to be set up thoroughly, and we have to really think about compliance and governance. And the last part I will somehow leave out. Autonomy is not something I see a lot with agents right now. I would be super happy if we have agents that can invoke certain tools and that give a sophisticated answer towards a researcher. So again, I will keep it short here, but we saw no agent systems. One-shot tasks usually are not that suitable for research. Many people with a one-shot task, when they ask something, retrieval won't be that good. We won't get the answer we need. So those single agents who do a scoped iterative task help a bit more on how to actually get good information, retrieve good information. And at some point in the future, we will see those multi-agent systems. I really liked what I heard before lunch, which was shrooming. And I always use that kind of note, because what we really see is everyone wants to be fast right now. Everyone wants to set up some kind of AI system. And we see all of those, I also call it shrooming, all of those little agents, these little wallies working in isolation and actually helping no one. We do data integration over and over again, and it's actually consuming more effort than it is helpful, or it is really, gaining value. So where I want to get to is kind of a society of minds, different agents doing a deterministic task with each other. So we have a kind of prefigured way that agents should work, invoke tools. And in future, sometimes a society of agents. And that will also mean rigorous governance. That does not mean everyone should do agents right now. But that could mean, and I have some customers who do that, to limit the amount of agents you want in your company, and to actually also take enterprise architecture management and tell them which are the processes, where does it really make sense, where do we have those high volume cumbersome tasks within research that we want to automate, which are the processes you talk about each and every day. Now let's look into the fit for labs. What we saw, and I will just name some of those figures, is 70% of experimentation is not reproducible. 50% of R&D assets are used under 20% of the time. And this is really the problems. I don't have to tell you about them. I was the guy who just raised his hand with being a techie. I'm not the researcher. You know much better than I do. But these are the problems, and these are the problems we want to solve with agentic workflows. There was also a good quote. Actually, being in wet labs really helps. That's what I tried to do for the last 2 years. Actually looking into those labs, seeing how interconnected or not interconnected they are, how different workflows actually are in between labs, and how siloed operations sometimes can be. There are two things. There's the massive information overload in daily communication. So we don't even have to start with these huge research problems. We can start with people chatting around with teams, sending emails. I've seen experiments, data being sent out as a PDF, and then somebody has to ingest it again, right? This is the massive amount of overload of information we actually have. You see that USB stick? That's because I talked to a researcher in one of the wet labs, and he told me, if I miss putting in this USB stick into that lab instrument, it actually won't take that data. So I will have to do the whole experiment over again, and that was 8 hours, right? So this is where we are right now, and this is at some point, not everywhere. We also have good labs that are completely IoT enabled, but this adds to the information overload. It could be a piece of paper where this information is on. The overwhelming data volume is clear to everyone. There's just so much data being produced, so much more papers being produced. Nobody could actually read them all. The lack of modalities. I've seen that in one wet lab where you actually had to wear this fancy 3M helmet. And then it gets very, very hard to input data to think about that. That's where we really work with speech to text and we have a company called Nuance, which does different, voice AI models, which are very specific to certain industries. Limited domain-aware entity linkage, also something we talked about, and the complexity of managing various stages. Now, where do we see a lot of this potential of AI? And I will just name a few because I also want to show you our platform, how Microsoft Discovery works, and maybe we'll also have time for some questions. But AI-curated content, right? What are my priorities as a researcher? I would usually start with asking people in labs, how many meetings do you have? I would ask project managers, how many meetings do you have? And maybe something I really love, and maybe some of the folks in pharmacy can actually add to this. Research, if you present that to management, is usually a PowerPoint, right? So at the end, the presentation you do is not something retrievable, but a lot of that is PowerPoint. PDF again. And that's very hard to then ingest again. And that's where LLMs or also agents are pretty good at. I talked about multimodal interactions. And what I really like, and I just want to say this across all of those domains, we talked a lot about actually standardizing data. So what I've seen is there was this poor fellow who had to work 2 years to standardize left eye and right eye, right? And other things. This is something where LLMs, and you can try it out, are pretty good at, right? They're not perfect, but there again, agentic workflows hit in where you have two agents working with each other. One agent will classify it, will transform the unstructured data to a structured format like a JSON. LLMs got very good in that. And then you would have a second agent checking if that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, and that's the part where I get really frustrated if people talk about autonomous agents, human should be in the loop. It should be prompted towards a human. Somebody should check. Everything we try to facilitate right now are not purely autonomous processes, but always with some certain human in the loop. If it is that somebody gets prompted all the automated tasks that are actually performed, or if there's unclarity based on this agent-to-agent interaction. So I built my little lab and how I could see the future, and some of those things are actually up and running already with our clients. I think the first thing is clear. Literature mining agent, we see a lot of different platforms where we did embeddings, where we also used all the patents, all the research documents, and you can interact with them with the AI layer on top. Right? We have, for example, did this with Boehringer Ingelheim, which we also published, and we do this with various customers. We then have agents, and they can compile the information you have. We are talking around 50 to 80 million documents we use in those data lakes. Another thing we see right now is having a generative agent. What do I mean with that? Actually also helping you to kind of summarize all that information. I will show you how that could look like in our Microsoft Discovery platform, and a simulation agent to kind of co-develop hypotheses and design safe experiments. I don't know if some were at London Labs Live, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, but there was a very impressive talk by a professor from, I guess it was Manchester, showing exactly this happening. So they used the agent model to actually create hypotheses and experiments, again, with a human in the loop. So I don't think that anyone has to really worry about her or his job. It's rather about, optimizing that process. Another thing that we see, or what I see as pretty important, inventory agents. We see a lot of SAP integration, other systems change, and that usually takes the longest time. So I'm not worried about setting up agents. I'm worried about the integration into those, I call them system of records. I created an agent with a customer, and it took us 2 weeks for a first MVP. It took us 1.5 years to get the SAP API set up. So I think also there has to be a clear data strategy, an API-first strategy to actually enable agents. It's not really about how to create agents, but to create this connectivity towards those system of source. I will just jump over the planning agent because I think that is clear, some orchestrating agents. What I really love, and actually I saw it in our own lab, with Microsoft Discovery is a robotics agent. I can use text to write down high throughput experimentation, a project. I can reference towards certain data, and then I can see a robot performing that in real time. And I think that's pretty awesome because I can just use my language, can just prompt that, and I don't have to understand how the robot actually works. For me, this was super impressive to see that in real time. I was sitting in Germany. You could prompt here in Redmond in one of our labs. The robot performed those tasks autonomously. So just to close on this, because I will also want to show you the platform itself, I think data analysis agent is clear. We talked about data scientists and researchers kind of being siloed from each other in some case. What I usually say is there will be more connectivity. There will be kind of a sharing of roles because now I could at least check my data, could ask a LM to create Python code. I could visualize it a bit, which does not mean that it will replace a data scientist, not at all, but it would help me to understand how a data scientist would exactly need the data to be set up and that I can understand more of the process. And at the end, a distribution agent, what we see, especially in large companies, sometimes the information that is new just does not get to the people that need to see it. So just understanding organizational structures and proactively informing people can really help a lot. We did a lot of different projects here, and it was very helpful because I would get my personalized summary of what happens in my company. Obviously, this needs one thing, change. What I've seen is a lot of people are not that prone to sharing that data in that form. So I think it's also a lot of change management involved. I just want to end here with another kind of abstraction on how to do this change. I usually use the 5 A's. First, from awareness, please share what is AI, share basics. Sometimes we are so far ahead, especially as IT organizations, that we forget to share the basics. What's an LM? What can an LM do? Why does it not perform very well when I ask it how many R's are there in strawberry? And I think this communication and coordination is super important, which will actually lead us to apprehension. People will understand and they will engage much further. If you lose them there, if you lose them with too complex use cases in the beginning, sometimes people will not really understand how to use those tools, will not be good in prompting, for example, and will just lose trust. We heard a lot about trust, which will lead to acceptance, at the end, adoption. And I think one of the most important things is anchoring. If you want to sustain it, you have to keep on building up those communities of, I usually call them catalysts, of those people that will share. Yeah? That don't need to be only extroverts, they can be also introverts, but you need to find the different ways that everyone can share. So not only open meetings, but maybe also just a chat, a group where also introverts can really share their use cases. And I think this kind of, especially the anchoring, is super hard. We also talked about different GPTs being set up. What we found very helpful is to have one centralized playground. And if I want to use a different model, let's deploy it onto that playground. Please just use the playground. Don't use your own tools or request different other tools. Whoops. Okay, now, so we just had our build conference and we announced Microsoft Discovery. It's basically a platform built on top of Azure, so our cloud. It's a graph-based scientific co-reasoning, which just means you can build agents on top of a graph database. We have specialized discovery agents in certain research areas, which are pre-configured. So we have different research teams, for example, in pharmaceutical industry and chemicals, where you can then actually have pre-configured agents, but you can also build your own. And as this is built on the Azure platform, it's fully extendable. I will not dive deep into the HPC and quantum part, but rather into the discovery agents. And what I really want to show you is where we started. This was an initiative called AI for Science, and it was basically Microsoft researchers talking to other researchers to build up a platform that is suitable for those processes. What we saw is Bespoke solutions lack broad impact in the R&D process, something we heard already. Like we always have to change something. Maybe sometimes bespoke solutions are just put into a certain division. Scientists and engineers need to navigate fragmented emerging technologies. I usually call that the media break. I have to open so many tools to actually get the information I need. I'm missing kind of this UI, this overarching UI. And we have to be regulatory compliant and also responsible. So once we have all the fragmented solutions, it gets very hard to have this overarching integration layer, which then can also ensure compliance. So I'll just move on how this looks like. So we built this up for chemistry, life science, physics, and we will also build it up for other verticals. But for now, those 3 verticals are specialized. We have specialized agents that are built. I already talked about the science platform. I just want to kind of emphasize on 2 things. First, we'll have a co-pilot for science. What we saw is the normal co-pilot was not suitable for researchers. Researchers use that in a one-shot way, and we're not really satisfied with the results because they're different to sales and marketing folks, for example. The specificity of the results has to be different. The referencing has to be different. So that's why we built the Copilot for Science. And we have built in the agent orchestration. So you don't have to care about the orchestration. That's something we do and that we cared of. And a science ecosystem, which also means it's not only Microsoft technologies. We are not experts in all of those processes. We don't not have all the ontologies needed. So we have a lot of other ecosystem partners to kind of integrate into that platform and to have this kind of harmonized data layer on top. I will now just talk about AI, but I really want to emphasize there's much more to it. We've seen that AI, and especially Gen AI, is not all. Right? If we only use Gen AI, we are missing on that. An agent will usually also invoke tools which are machine learning workflows, which are automation workflows, which we are already using now, but you would have that abstraction layer of orchestration. On the other hand, we saw that high-performance computing and also quantum in the future will really help us with the speed of innovation. So I just wanted to show you one example, and I will also link you the video to the whole example because it was presented by someone who is much more knowledgeable than me, who leads our chemistry initiative within Microsoft Discovery. But what we did here is we tried to identify a novel immersion coolant, and we wanted to do that without being harmful for the environment, so no PFAS. What you see now is that this Copilot interacts differently because on the right hand, you will get a much more sophisticated report on the right side, and it will really tell you how it created that, and you can now interact. So we saw this one-shot answers we got with Copilot was not sufficient. That's why we kind of split it in that way, so you can actually get all of this on a more, let's say, more paper-based approach. What you can also see, there are always the references. So you can also hover over them. You can see the references. You can jump into the system of record, or you can see where it comes from, which is extremely important if you want to actually generate trust with the system. What you can now then see is it will give you an agentic approach. So you see that it invokes another agent, and it will actually give you a plan. In this case, it will plan to identify non-PFAS coolants, and it will show you how it generates the candidate molecules with one agent, perform the regulatory compliance check. We talked about regulatory compliance, so this could also be an agent, the mole predictor agent, and so on. And once you're fine with it, you can click on proceed, or you can edit that, invoke different other agents, or also just ask for something that you find missing. So you will always be able to also check the agent logs, and you can also see what have they interacted with, which systems have they interacted with, how does it look like behind. And then you would actually get towards the molecules, and you can also find all of that information and computations. And this computation does not have to be Gen AI. Again, this could be machine learning models, HPC happening behind that. This will be then provided in a standardized format in a JSON. So you can also use it in different other platforms, right? So it's always integratable with other platforms, as well as you will get a kind of nice visualization and the smiles input as well. So here you can just see what happened after we did all of that. We actually asked a partner, because this coolant was important for our own Azure infrastructure. We wanted to find a coolant who is not, who does not have PFAS. And so we asked one of our partners to develop that coolant so that our project manager can play his most favorite game on that computer and see if it works under high pressure or kind of high compute. So what you're seeing here is actually the processor working in that coolant, which has to have certain characteristics, and he can play his game without any problems. So what made this special? It took us under 10 days to develop that coolant formula. It took us under 4 months to actually do that test. So I think that's really what really shows that this integrated platform can even help us. And believe me, and I will also link you the video, we are kind of the first users of our own technology, because we need it on our own for both chemistry innovation using our new quantum chips, as well as innovation in our infrastructure. So if you want to learn more, let me jump. I also linked you the whole video. Somehow it does not want to move. It's stuck. Sorry. Yeah, but I will close it with that. And we'll ask if there are any questions, if we have time for questions. The only slides I wanted to share afterwards was just, this is built on a huge partner ecosystem. That's not what we do. Our business is not to provide specific solutions for one certain domain, but to provide the platform and integration capabilities. And you can also integrate platforms which are not Microsoft, right? So if you have anything hosted on AWS, Google, you don't need to migrate it. We can also connect it with using Fabric. Okay, cool. Any questions? I don't know if we have time left.
Yes. Questions for sure. Yes. So, thank you, Freddie.
Sure.
Questions? Who's got the runner? Where's the runner?
I could also hear you.
Thanks a lot for the impressive talk. More or less a stupid question. Do we still need data governance then?
Yes. Yeah, I think you'll need that, because, I mean, we talked about, I also, one of the previous talks, which I worked in data strategy and data governance before, and the thing is, you need to know which data is important to you and which is not important. And agents or also LLMs might not know this, so you need to identify critical elements, critical data elements. You need to have data owners, and some kind of rigorous governance. At this point right now, we will not have everything sorted out by being fully integrated. So I think this is still one of the largest problems we have, that data ownership is not a concept that we implemented. We usually have our great committees, we have our great data governance in some PDF or Word document, but the data ownership itself is still a topic I would address with AI.
Thanks a lot for clarifying that. That's an important one. Now the second question, how do I tell that my senior management? Because they will, if they see those slides, they will cut my budget to almost zero, and at the meantime directly invest heavily into Microsoft Discovery. So
I would tell them, but no. But I think it's important to still shit in, shit out, right? So what they do is the tools will still invoke the same machine learning models we used before, because ML and traditional AI still is suitable for a lot of the problems you have. And Gen AI will just be the orchestration part of it. So I think maybe it's very important to show this on a kind of a layer level, so that AI will help me with augmentation, orchestration. But a thing that comes up now a lot is agentic automation. So all the parts we've seen before is basically something you're using right now, and you will have the same problems. Another thing I would do is just the cost of data quality, because that will remain. Actually, data quality will become more important, because beforehand, we just apply data governance and data quality towards tables, structured data. Now, everything unstructured is also part of your data governance, right? So that makes it even harder to know. When I wrote you a funny email about a project I will never set up, how should AI know that this was just a joke, right? Could be due to tonality and so on, but you get my point, right? We really have to be much more thorough on classifying which data we will need, and to also do this with unstructured data. So, yeah.
Good. Sandra?
Yeah. So today I wanted to inform, not sell. But usually we actually, I mean, it depends. We wouldn't talk typically to chemists, but I would talk to IT folks, so IT executives, and to digitization leaders within the research and development. Because again, it's the layer. It's usually not the problem. We can solve all problems with distinct tools on a divisional or on a kind of vertical approach, but the horizontal approach is sometimes missing. So yeah, as I told you, I see a huge problem with data integration still. I see data lakes turning into data swamps. I see that siloing of both wet and dry labs. So yeah, so I would rather talk to the folks in IT and digitization, but we also have dedicated teams that will talk to chemists and will go much deeper into the kind of chemical computation piece of it. But sorry, I'm not the right guy for that. I apologize for that.
One more over there. Oh, there was one there. Oh.
Sorry, Suchi.
Oh, yeah. As people start to integrate AI into more and more workflows, what advice do you give them? Because you've said it's important for a human to be part of that at every step. People are getting busier and busier, and we're seeing it in education and lots of other areas where people are actually just exporting their brains, or actually choosing not to do the thinking part, but just allowing it to do that. What tips or advice do you give for stopping people from stop thinking?
That's a tough question. Maybe it's also a culture thing. If you just want to stop thinking, maybe as
British
a
culture, yeah.
as a company. No, I'm not. But if you're incentivizing people to not think as a company, I think it's a huge culture problem. What I rather see is that people are so overloaded with mundane tasks each and every day. And I've seen these people actually writing stuff on a piece of paper and then entering it into a system they hate. So I think that's rather where we should start. And that's really about the educational piece of saying, hey, we just had the discussion on how can I have time for innovation? Maybe we should advertise this as not this agent will do everything for you, but let's look into these little things and automate them so you actually have time to think again. What we saw in our work trend index is every 2 minutes, so we have all the data, billions of data points on M365. On average, a person using our technology, so Word, Teams, whatever, is being pinged, is being distracted every 2 minutes. So that's something we want to reduce, right? We want to reduce that to make researchers think for a longer period of time. And agents could be a thing. Summarizing my messages rather on an hourly or 2 hourly basis, proactively informing me in the format I like, instead of a hi message on Teams, and also helping me with data input. So these would be the first things I would tackle instead of thinking of let's build this huge agentic automation framework that will do everything. Let's do StageGate completely with agents, right? So I think it's rather about those things and finding them and connecting them to the right KPIs. So that's also something we spoke about. Because what I also see and dislike sometimes is this bottom-up approach. Everyone think about a use case and then we'll prioritize. And at the end, let's think about how we can actually quantify it. So I think we just need like an equilibrium of both. Yeah. Hope that answers a bit of your question. But if you, yeah.
Good. So that's enough. Sorry, we haven't got any more time for Freddie. Freddie, thank you very much again.